Okay, so not too long ago I made this tank. Now, this tank was pretty cool. It had a pretty good cannon and fire quite far. The only problem is it wasn't that good. You see, just wasn't that much space to add any more stuff. So today I'm going to make a battleship. So yeah, I made a battleship before. It was kind of pretty bad though because it only fired spud guns and just couldn't destroy much other things than well hay bots and farm bots. So yeah, today I'm going to make a battleship which hopefully has lots of ammo, it shoots explosives, and it's just good in general. So first I'm going to start with the base of the turret. We've got, well, it kind of done. We're going to start working on, well, methods of propulsion for the actual ammo. So our first idea was just add spud gun to the back, see how much, like, recoil it produced. But this was just not enough to actually propel a large explosive anywhere. So then I did my normal, well, spud guns hit cardboard, and it sends the explosive flying design. Now, this is one I'm going to stick with because it's pretty simple. But also, I might do it in a bit of a different way. So now we're going to test out how good this is. You see, there's quite a lot of spud guns, so this thing's going to go pretty far. This thing's going to need to go pretty far, which is going to be pretty useful. The only problem is the current firing system is quite big, but we'll just have to deal with it for now. Now, my idea was basically when we fire off the explosive, it basically just blows up the entire firing system, and then when we want to load another one in, we just load a whole new firing system in. So my idea was to have a firing system for every single explosive, so it looks like this. But this is pretty big, kind of too big, especially if we want two on each cannon, and we're going to want quite a few cannons. So I think this might be too big. So instead we're going to go for a bit of a small design which will fire small explosives. And this will make it technically less effective, but also we'll have quite a lot of cannons so it won't matter too much. And having large explosives will just make it way too big, or just it won't have enough ammo. So this thing's going to have around 8 ammo, I've decided, since that's good. It's good enough because I'm not going to be reloading this thing because it'll take hours. And after we hook up all these, the first test should be ready. And as you can see, it goes quite far away. You can hardly see it, to be honest. So yeah, now I'm just going to weld 8 of these together. You see, these are going to be quite close, so it is going to have to look a bit weird. Not every piece of ammo will be the same. And here's how it looks. It won't be too big, but it's also pretty big still. But there's a bit of a problem that when we activate the actual cannon, it doesn't actually shoot off the explosive. That means there's something colliding with the cardboard that basically shoots this thing forward. So we're going to need to change a few things. So the only way to do this is to, get rid of some connection points on the cardboard. So I'm basically just going to use weird blocks like toilet paper and wires, to basically stop them colliding, which should make it work. And now it should work. So I've hooked up everything, and as you can see, it goes forward and explodes. Now this is basically the actual firing system done, but there's still more to do. So we're going to make the actual base of the turret now. This is still going to have to be pretty big. I'm actually quite scared to make this thing float, since it's going to be a pain. Now we've attached both of them to the cannon. Now these things are quite big, so we probably aren't going to be able to cover them up fully. So I'm going to try and do my best, but also I don't want this thing to be too big, so I probably won't cover much of the cannon up. So yeah, I'm just going to try and make this thing look okay. Now, this thing is not going to look the greatest, and it's quite hard to fit things in, small spaces, especially this cannon. So yeah, this thing's going to have to look a bit weird, since we don't want anything colliding in the actual mechanism. So yeah, now for this thing to be able to move up and down, we're going to need a massive counterweight on the back. Now this is going to be a pain to make float because we're adding like loads of weight just so we can turn the cannon up, but it should be worth it. And now you can see the cannon can actually point upwards, which is going to be, well, I guess kind of useful for when we actually use it. So I'm just going to hook up a seat to everything, and now we can turn the cannon. Now we can't actually fire yet because the way we need to hook in, well, a button to every single logic gate, so this might take a while. But as you can see, we can now turn it. So I just hook up a button and a sensor to each of its logic gates, which is going to be pretty, well, hard to do. Well, it's going to take quite a long time. But now we can fire, well, most of them. Well, I haven't hooked up the sensors, so that's why they all fire at once. But as you can see, not all of them fired. Now this is fine, since they will all fire when we fire them individually. And since it's just something that happens to mechanics sometimes. And as you can see, we can now fire one. If we hold the button down, it also, well, fires them automatically, which is pretty cool. Also turns into, well, a spud. Now you can see we can fire them pretty fast. Of course, I'm not going to do this because on the actual battleship, because it makes them, well, fire really quick, and also makes it explode sometimes, which I rather this thing be reliable. As you can see, we can fire everything at quite a decent range. I'm also going to add a cannon, since even though this won't be functional and is absolutely tiny, it's going to look cool. I mean, I didn't like how they look here, so I kind of moved them inwards. And now this looks like kind of derpy, but I also quite like how it looks, so it's staying. Well, now the cannon's done. Now this cannon's actually pretty good, so I'm quite glad that we're going to be putting this on a battleship. So of course, now we need to actually build the battleship part of this. Now, this is going to be quite a pain since this is going to be massive. I decided I'll put around 2 cannons on this, otherwise the battleship will just be massive, and even though I want this thing to be big, it'll also be kind of a pain. So now we just need to make, like, well, the deck of the actual battleship. So yeah, I made the deck. This thing's massive. Up there in the front, that's where the cannon is. So yeah, and this thing also doesn't float. It's going to be a pain to make this thing float because the cannon's weigh loads, and we're going to be putting loads of metal on this thing. And as you can see, well, the end floats, but not the battleship cannon. Which is kind of expected since wood isn't very buoyant. But this thing does look pretty cool when it's sunk. So yeah, now we need to actually like add metal to the sides. So this is going to take a bit of time. Now we've added, well, the bottom half of the metal. Now we need to add the top half of the metal that's like kind of a railing or something, so we don't just fall off. Now this is going to take a while, but we're basically already done. And now this thing will actually look pretty good. I mean, it does look a bit weird since it's not like the hull isn't battleship shaped, but it'll have to do. This thing's pretty big, and now I'm just gonna put, well, bubble wrap in it just so hopefully it like floats kind of. Problem with bubble wrap is when you have lots of it, it doesn't work like properly, but we're just gonna have to deal with it. So now I've almost finished putting all the bubble wrap in. I mean, it's not gonna float with all this because there's like for every piece of bubble wrap there's like 12 metal, which is quite a lot. And as you can see, well, the end floats, but the battleship turret does not. And as you can see, it kind of sinking to the bottom. So now I'm going to put in these blue crates, which are also quite buoyant. Now this should help, but obviously this battleship turret like weighs loads, so this didn't really help too much. Now I'm going to add like some tier 3 concrete, so it kind of acts as like a weight on the bottom, so this thing doesn't flip over. I don't think this thing's going to help, so, but now I just swapped out all the blue packages with bubble wrap, and it still doesn't float. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is make this thing so it doesn't flip over. Because even though we added tier 3 concrete, it still flips over. So I'm just gonna make this little thing that basically always points up in the water. So and that'll detect, and then some sensors to detect if it's flipping over. Then I'll activate some sensors, and now it should work. I also added some thrusters at the front to make the thing float, and it does float. Surprisingly, it actually doesn't float at the back now, which is quite surprising. Now this thing is going to need quite a lot more work, but this is pretty good for now. So now I'm going to start like building out the actual battleship, deck kind of thing. So I can add another cannon, because this thing's going to have 2 cannons. Now it could have 3, but also it would just be a pain to fit on because this thing's massive. And now I put on the second one, this thing looks not too bad. And now we can actually shoot them, and it's pretty effective. This thing probably will destroy anything it comes across, which is going to be pretty cool. But anyway. So anyway, now we're actually going to need to build some more stuff on the battleship. Because right now, it's kind of just 2 battleship cannons and nothing else. So we need to build I don't know, like somewhere where we can actually control it. But anyway, now I've built quite a lot, this thing does not look too bad. Up at the top is where I'll control it, but this thing still needs some work on the inside since there's not much you can walk around. Now this isn't going to have like any interior really, it's going to have some spaces to walk around, but that'll be all. So now we're going to add a stairway. Now this will connect the top decks and the front of the boat, which is going to be pretty useful, especially if we need to go to the battleship cannons quick. But I'll probably just jump down anyway. So now I finished all the stairways, we can now go everywhere we want over the battleship. It's going to be pretty useful. This thing also looks pretty menacing, so this thing will be pretty fun to use. I also am going to add a bit to the back because it looks a bit empty. There's also a big empty space in the back, but we'll talk about that later. So now I made another stairway, and now we can go from the back to the front of the ship in a few seconds. So yeah, the back's kind of empty, but there's not enough space for like another battleship cannon. So I'm just gonna make some small spud gun cannons at the back. Now this probably won't help since the battleship cannons will be a lot more effective than the actual spud cannons, but it doesn't really matter since they'll make this thing look kind of better. As you can see, they now work. They're both controlled by one seat, and will do quite a lot of damage to any bots that come near us. So I'm also going to add some more thrusters so this thing actually floats. Now this thing sinks quite a bit now, and also it is going to not flip over, but it will lean a bit, which isn't much of a problem, but sometimes the decks will be kind of flooded. As you can see, now it floats. Now the current problem is that there's no forward thrusters, so we can't go forwards. So this is going to be pretty simple, since you have to hook up quite a lot of thrusters. But I mean like a lot of thrusters. This thing needs around like 36 thrusters to move, which is quite a lot, but it's going to be worth it. Now of course, it does flood a bit, no, the actual deck, but it does correct itself, so don't worry. And now we can actually go forwards. In the actual thing there won't be an actual seat, it's just so I can actually see outside. And we go forward at a pretty good speed now. So now we're going to have to add some thrusters on either side so we can actually turn. Now this isn't going to be able to turn on the spot, which is a bit unrealistic, but it's going to help a lot. But now we can turn, not really sharp, but it's going to be worth it because I can't bother to add any more thrusters. Now we can go wherever we want now, but this thing still doesn't feel complete. So I'm going to add torpedoes. Now my first idea was just to have a metal shell filled with explosives because they're quite buoyant, and some bubble wrap. Now this didn't work basically, it just wouldn't float even with bubble wrap, so this thing's probably going to need to be aired out something else that's a bit more buoyant. So yeah, I built it out of wood. Now wood's a pretty good idea since it's quite well light and also pretty buoyant, so this thing should go pretty fast. Now I am going to paint it because it does look kind of ugly, but this thing will also, well yeah, go pretty fast. Now this thing's going to be pretty simple, it's just going to have some sensors in the front, which detect if there's anything in front of them, and then just trigger some spud guns that should blow up like some of the explosives inside. Now this thing goes pretty fast and works okay right now. There is going to be a slight problem maybe that it sometimes crashes into the ship, but it doesn't matter too much. So I'm basically going to attach this to the side of the ship with cardboard, which will get broken by spud guns, making the torpedoes fall in the water. Now this thing's going to have 2 torpedoes, one on either side. Now they'll be probably more effective than the battleship cannons, but they'll also probably not be as accurate as a long range, which kind of doesn't matter too much. So as you can see, when we activate it, it just goes forwards and will explode if it hits anything. Well, it will soon, since I haven't actually hooked the spud guns until now. Now, I also got this one big problem that it basically just went into the side of the ship and blew up, which is kind of a problem that I can't just let slide, so I'm going to have to make a way for this thing to, steer away from the ship, basically. So I'm basically just going to add a timer, which basically makes it so one of the thrusters activates after, like a few milliseconds after, so it basically turns away and then goes forwards. Which will make this thing less accurate, but will make it stop blowing up, so I think it's worth it. So yeah, now this thing's pretty much done. Now the torpedoes do work, I had to just put a 300 millisecond delay in it, and yeah. So this thing wasn't too hard to make. The battleship cannon was pretty hard, but probably one of the hardest things was making this thing float. Now this thing's lots of fun to use because of how much ammo the battleship cannon has, so you don't really need to worry about reloading, so you can just fire it loads. Now it isn't the best since it doesn't float properly, so when it starts sinking it kind of flips over and just starts flying away kind of, since the thing does have enough thrusters to make it go pretty fast. Now this thing does sink pretty easily as well, but it doesn't matter too much. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and the blueprint for this should be in the comments, I think, if I remembered. Anyway, bye!